Standard 5. Assessing Children's Development and Learning. Accomplished early childhood teachers use assessment to support and guide young children's development and learning. Accomplished early childhood generalists assess and document young children's development and subject matter knowledge. Assessment is a process through which teachers learn about children's social, cognitive, linguistic, physical, and emotional development by gathering and interpreting information. They ensure that assessment practices fairly and equitably focus on children's emerging capabilities. Teachers set clear purposes for assessment, systematically and efficiently employ a variety of developmentally appropriate assessment tools, and accurately interpret assessment data. They use assessment results to guide teaching and learning, a process which includes communicating assessment results in meaningful ways to children, families, and colleagues, and includes setting instructional goals. Accomplished early childhood teachers make assessment a daily, ongoing activity that is embedded in the routines of teaching and learning. They know that assessment draws on insights from beyond the classroom. Teachers observe children throughout the educational environment and incorporate the observations of families and colleagues such as school psychologists, nurses, occupational therapists, social workers, and counselors. Teachers use what they learn from assessment as they plan and implement instruction. Setting clear assessment purposes. Accomplished early childhood teachers clearly articulate their purposes for assessment. They ensure that assessments capture information about the whole child for an array of educational purposes, such as documenting children's achievement, evaluating the curriculum, and improving instruction. Teachers collaborate with young children and families when articulating learning goals and following the child's development in light of those goals, and they use well-defined purposes as a foundation for the assessment process. Accomplished early childhood teachers purposefully focus on young children's development and their emerging subject matter knowledge. To develop a comprehensive picture of a child's social relationships, modes of learning, use of language, family priorities and resources, strengths, and any possible concerns, teachers collaborate with the child's family and other professionals in addition to relying on their own data. Because they know that children's development is not linear, teachers attend to changes in the ways children think and behave over time. They trace the ways in which children engage in cross-disciplinary practices, such as experimentation, problem solving, and using primary and secondary sources. Teachers stay informed about changing national, state, and local subject matter standards. And they use these standards in combination with developmental milestones as lenses for analyzing children's progress. Accomplished teachers advocate for subject matter goals that are developmentally appropriate and meaningful. Selecting and using different assessments. Accomplished early childhood teachers draw on a professional knowledge base that includes research, standards, theory, and best practices related to assessment in order to achieve familiarity with the full range of available assessments. They judiciously select the appropriate tool for a given purpose based on a deep understanding of child development, their observations of specific children, and knowledge of the data that the assessment generates. Teachers know when to employ standardized assessments and when to use performance-based assessments. They understand the differences between formative and summative assessments and know when to employ each type. They use pre-assessments to determine a child's baseline knowledge or developmental level, and post-assessments to determine whether a child has met a desired goal. Accomplished teachers collect samples of children's learning and development over time with tools such as anecdotal records and portfolios. They may use conversations as a way to gain valuable information from a child or parent. They know how to develop meaningful and comprehensive checklists to observe specific skills, and they employ rubrics that clearly and comprehensively reflect the criteria for evaluating a specific task. Accomplished teachers ensure that assessments validly assess the skills they purport to measure. For example, a mathematics assessment may require a child to identify or draw shapes rather than merely asking questions about shapes. Accomplished teachers employ multiple assessments to discover valuable information about the whole child and to define and prioritize teaching, learning, and developmental goals. Accomplished early childhood teachers do more than select the most appropriate assessments. They know the most effective ways to administer them. Teachers modify assessments for different learning modalities and developmental levels in ways that ensure individualization while preserving the integrity of the assessment. For example, a teacher might visually administer parts of a test to a child who is hard of hearing or might modify instructions for a child whose native language is not English. Teachers attend to equity not only in the selection of assessment tools, but in the assessment environment. They understand that the context in which young children are assessed has an enormous impact on children's ability to demonstrate their knowledge and potential. When appropriate, teachers strive to elicit what a child knows by prompting, probing, and rephrasing. Accomplished early childhood teachers ensure that their assessment practices are equitable and fair, and that they meet the needs of diverse learners. Teachers construct, select, and tailor assessments so that every child has an equal opportunity to show what he or she knows and is able to do. Teachers allow for flexibility, giving children choice in how they demonstrate what they know. For example, children might be allowed to role play, draw, write, or make models to demonstrate their knowledge of the plant cycle. Teachers schedule assessments in ways that ensure all children have had substantial and differentiated opportunities to learn targeted skills before they are assessed. Interpreting assessment data. Accomplished early childhood teachers are able to efficiently analyze, interpret, and summarize assessment data, including data from mandated, standardized, and performance-based assessments. When applicable, teachers use technological tools to organize and analyze data, and they collaborate with other professionals if they have difficulty interpreting certain data. When interpreting assessment results, teachers actively seek to determine whether the data present an accurate picture of a child's knowledge or development. They make this determination by applying different lenses, including their knowledge of planned learning outcomes and typical patterns of child development, plus their accumulated data on the individual child and that child's family and community. Accomplished early childhood teachers are well informed about the nature of all early childhood assessments and the types of inferences that can validly be drawn from them. Teachers do not draw unjustified conclusions or overgeneralize based on limited assessment results. Rather, they make only those claims for which there is sufficient data. They evaluate their own assessments and remove any instances of bias that they identify. Early childhood teachers receive information from outside assessments, such as speech evaluations, and they critically interpret the results. To the extent possible, accomplished teachers rigorously appraise all assessment information that is used to determine a child's strengths and needs. Communicating assessment data. Accomplished early childhood teachers know how to communicate assessment results clearly and meaningfully. They sensitively and accurately explain assessment results to children, families, and colleagues, providing evidence that supports their findings. For example, a teacher might share with parents that a child's gross motor skills have advanced from hopping to skipping and would explain the significance of this developmental trajectory. Accomplished teachers frame their interpretations in positive language, emphasizing children's strengths and then explaining what next steps are needed. They document pertinent information and convey it as appropriate to other stakeholders, such as next year's teacher or an occupational therapist. They understand the usefulness and limitations of results from mandated tests, and they help children and parents understand the purpose, results, and meaning of such assessments. When in doubt, accomplished teachers seek guidance from colleagues on how best to communicate assessment results. Accomplished early childhood teachers understand that assessment is a collaborative process. Communication among members of the educational team is essential for determining goals, planning for children's transitions from one setting to the next, developing educational plans, monitoring and revising these plans, and determining the need for additional services or supports. Good communication about assessment data is essential. Families need to understand the significance and limitations of test data, and children can use assessment data to evaluate their work and then set expectations based on their strengths and needs. Using assessment data to inform teaching and learning. Accomplished early childhood teachers view assessment data as the starting point for informing their teaching practices. They review assessment data critically and use the data as a basis for selecting instructional goals and objectives, organizing learning environments, selecting teaching and learning materials, creating flexible instructional groups, and planning and implementing instruction. Accomplished early childhood teachers use assessment data to identify children whose development is outside the expected range. They can determine the nature of the necessary intervention, ranging from modifying the environment to referring the children for further evaluation. Teachers know how to implement an educational plan by including its functional goals and objectives into daily lesson plans and by making modifications and adaptations as necessary. Accomplished early childhood teachers effectively participate in all team discussions about using assessment results in planning. They contribute insights based on observations of children's classroom behavior. They communicate with colleagues who are also currently working with the children and those who will work with the children the following year. Teachers share documented information on children's behaviors, abilities, interests, and responsiveness to different instructional strategies. Accomplished early childhood teachers encourage children to evaluate their own work as a way to take responsibility for their own learning and behavior. Teachers model for children how to design rubrics and use them to judge their performances on given tasks. Teachers provide opportunities for children to use self-assessment to set goals. A teacher might help younger children contrast their drawings of people made in September with drawings made in January, and then decide how to develop their drawing skills in the coming months. A teacher might help older children select a piece of writing to reflect on, articulate the reasons behind the selection of that particular example, elaborate on the strengths and weaknesses of the writing, and use the results to determine the next writing goal. Addressing issues of mandated assessments. Accomplished early childhood teachers know the value and limitations of mandated assessments, which may or may not be standardized. Accomplished teachers understand that mandated tests, like all assessments, have specific purposes and that it is problematic to use them for purposes beyond those for which they were intended. Teachers realize that mandated tests may have minimal relevance for day-to-day instruction, but can be useful when a teacher is thinking cumulatively across years and across classes about the effectiveness of the curriculum. Accomplished teachers are aware of the controversies surrounding high-stakes tests, including using test data as the sole determinant for retaining young children in their current grade, and they assume an analytic stance toward the data that mandated tests provide. Accomplished teachers are able to draw on their knowledge of the test and their interpretation of the data to share well-warranted information with children and families. Accomplished early childhood teachers may find themselves in situations in which a program, school district, or state mandates tests that fail to reflect the full range of children's learning and development, or that are flawed in some other way. Teachers do their best to mitigate the detrimental effects of such practices. Teachers also stay informed about positive trends in the development of more comprehensive, meaningful, and constructive forms of observational and performance-based assessments for young children, and they actively advocate for changes in assessment policy so that testing practices are aligned with effective instructional practices. This is the end of Standard 5.